He knocked on my door, and everything changed. Mark adjusted his glasses as he looked out the kitchen window. At 52, his routine was as predictable as a Swiss watch. Coffee at 7, remote work until 6, dinner alone. The old building in Greenwich Village had been his quiet refuge for 10 years. Until that Thursday, the sound of furniture being dragged invaded the piece of apartment 7C. Mark sighed, mentally preparing himself for weeks of renovations and relentless hammering. But when he opened the door to complain, he came face to face with a man who completely disarmed his carefully rehearsed words. Clement had perfectly tousled gray hair, broad shoulders that filled out his white linen shirt, and a smile that seemed to hold interesting secrets. He wore his 48 years with dignity. "Sorry about the noise," Clement said, extending his hand. "I promise I'll be a quiet neighbor eventually." His handshake was firm, warm, and lasted a second longer than necessary. Mark felt something strange in his stomach. "No problem. Mark from 7C. Clement, just moved from Boston. Recent divorce, you know how it is, needed a fresh start." There was a calculated vulnerability in those words. In the following days, their encounters became frequent. Clement always needed something: sugar, a borrowed hammer, a grocery store recommendation. Mark, who avoided social interactions like someone fleeing persistent salespeople, found himself waiting for the knocks on his door. "Do you know anything about plumbing?" Clement showed up one Saturday morning, shirt open revealing gray chest hair. "My sink is clogged and the super isn't answering." Mark swallowed hard. "I can take a look." In the narrow bathroom of 7D, their bodies inevitably drew close as Mark examined the pipes. Clement's cologne was intoxicating, something between wood and spices. "You're very helpful, Mark. Men like you are rare." "It's just being neighborly," he murmured, focusing on the pipes and not the warmth he felt. "Of course," Clement smiled. "Pure neighborliness." When Mark finally solved the problem and stood up, their hands touched accidentally. Neither moved. "Dinner?" "To say thanks," Clement suggested. Mark knew he should refuse, but something in those brown eyes made him want to accept every invitation. "Next Saturday?" "Perfect." Saturday arrived loaded with anxiety. Mark changed clothes 3 times, something he hadn't done in years. He chose a navy blue shirt that Martha, his ex-wife, used to say brought out his eyes. Why was he thinking about this now? Clement opened the door barefoot, wearing a casual shirt and dress pants. Come in, come in. I hope you like pasta. I learned some tricks living in Italy." The apartment smelled of garlic, wine, and something indefinable that made Mark comfortable. The decor was masculine but refined, abstract paintings, shelves full of books, a guitar leaning in the corner. "Do you play?" Mark pointed at the instrument. "When life gets tough, I loosen the strings." Clement poured red wine generously. "And you? What do you do when you need to relax?" "I read. Work. Read some more." Intense life, Clement teased, his eyes sparkling with amusement. During dinner, they talked about everything: books, travels, regrets. Clement spoke about his 20-year marriage that ended when he finally admitted truths he'd hidden his entire life. "I got tired of pretending," he said simply. "Life's too short to live comfortable lies." Mark felt each word like a mirror. His own marriage had ended 5 years ago, but he'd never had the courage to name what had really happened. He simply grew distant until Martha packed her bags. "And now?" Mark asked, more wine in his bloodstream than he admitted. "Now I'm discovering who I really am. At 48 years old." Clement held Mark's gaze. "It's never too late, right?" The night flowed between empty bottles and laughter. When Mark realized it, it was 2 in the morning. "I need to go." "Or you could stay," Clement said softly. "The couch is comfortable." Something in the air changed. Mark knew he wasn't just talking about the couch. "I think I'd better go." "Of course." Clement smiled without pressure. "Thanks for the company. It's been a while since I talked like this." At the door, they said goodbye. This time, the handshake came with a brief but intense hug. Mark slept poorly that night, Clement's cologne still clinging to his skin. Monday brought heavy rain and an unexpected encounter. Mark entered the elevator soaking wet, cursing his broken umbrella. Clement was already there, equally drenched, holding work folders against his chest. "Looks like we're in a competition for who gets wetter," Clement joked. Then the elevator stopped, the lights flickered, and everything went dark. "Perfect," Mark murmured, trying to control the claustrophobia rising in his throat. "Hey, it's okay." Clement's voice was steady in the darkness. "I already hit the alarm. Maintenance should be here soon." In complete darkness, protected by invisibility, words flowed differently. "That dinner," Mark began, "was the best night I've had in years. For me too." A pause. "Mark, can I ask you something?" "Ask. Have you ever allowed yourself to be who you really are?" The question hung in the dark air. Mark felt tears burn his eyes, grateful for the darkness that hid them. "I'm afraid," he finally admitted. 52 years carrying masks. I don't know if I know how to take them off." "I understand perfectly." Clement's voice was closer. "I carried mine for too long, too. Kids, wife, in-laws' expectations. Until the day I looked in the mirror and didn't recognize who was there." "What made you change?" "I met someone. Nothing happened, but it was enough to realize I was slowly dying. So I chose to live even if it hurt." Mark felt a hand find his in the darkness. Fingers intertwined. "Simple as that. You don't need to rush," Clement whispered. "But you don't need to be afraid either. Not with me." The lights came back abruptly. They quickly released their hands, but something fundamental had changed. When they looked at each other, there were no more doubts about what was growing between them. Maintenance arrived 10 minutes later. They left the elevator in silence. But Mark knew he would return to apartment 7D soon. And this time he would stay. 3 days passed of exchanged messages, hallway glances, excuses to knock on the door. Until Thursday night, Mark simply rang the doorbell. Clement opened, surprised but clearly happy. "Hi. Can I come in?" "Always." Inside, Mark stood in the middle of the living room, breathing deeply. "I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to start." Clement approached slowly, like someone approaching something fragile. "You don't need to know. You just need to wanna." "I want to." The words came out hoarse. "But I'm 52 years old, and I've never—" "Me neither. Not truly." Clement touched his face gently. "So we'll learn together." The first kiss was hesitant, almost chaste, lips meeting with apprehension, testing unknown territories. But then something broke. Years of denial, decades of disguised loneliness, and the kiss deepened. Hands discovering contours, accelerated breathing, the urgency of those who waited a lifetime. In bed, Clement was patient. "We can stop whenever you want." "I don't want to stop." Mark pulled him closer. "I just don't want it to end." And it didn't end quickly. They explored each other with teenage curiosity and the passion of mature men who know the value of what they'd found. Each touch was a discovery, each moan a confession. Afterward, lying between tangled sheets, Mark laughed for the first time in years, a free, light laugh. "What are you laughing about?" Clement caressed his chest. "I spent my whole life thinking something was wrong with me. And actually, I was just looking in the wrong direction. The right direction can change everything." Clement kissed his shoulder. "Stay tonight." "I'll stay." For the first time since moving into that building, Mark slept deeply, nestled in the arms of someone who made him feel completely right. The following weeks were a roller coaster. During the day, they maintained professional distance in the building. At night, Mark crossed the hallway like someone crossing a bridge to another world. But secrets have weight. Mrs. Peterson, the gossipy building manager from the 5th floor, started asking questions. "You two have become good friends, huh? I always see Mark going into 7D. We're neighbors." Mark would respond, feeling his blood run cold. One afternoon, Mark's son, Peter, showed up unannounced. 28 years old, successful lawyer, traditional expectations. "Dad, we need to talk about selling this apartment. It's too big for you alone." While they discussed, Clement knocked on the door. "Mark, I left my—" "Oh, sorry, I didn't know you had company." Peter looked between the two, noticing something intangible but present. This is the new neighbor? Clement, nice to meet you. The handshake was formal, but Peter didn't seem convinced. When Clement left, Peter crossed his arms. Dad, what's going on? Nothing. We're friends. Friends. Peter laughed without humor. Mom called me worried. Said you're different, distant. Now I understand. Peter? No, Dad. Let me talk. His voice was loaded with judgment. You're 52 years old. Are you going through some kind of crisis? Because this isn't who you are. Mark felt anger rise. Anger from accumulated years, from pretending, from living for others' approval. And who am I, Peter? Tell me. Because I spent my whole life trying to be who everyone expected, and only now discovered who I really am. This is ridiculous. You were married for 20 years. And unhappy for 19. The words came out like bullets. Your mother knew. I knew. But it was easier to pretend, wasn't it? Peter went pale. I can't believe you're doing this. With a man. Leave, Peter. Mark opened the door. When you're ready to talk like adults, come back. But don't come to judge my life. Alone, Mark collapsed on the couch. Minutes later, Clement rang the doorbell softly. I heard the argument. I'm sorry. Mark pulled him inside, hugging him tightly. Don't apologize. For the first time, I defended who I really am. And was it worth it? Mark looked into Clement's eyes. Every second. The news spread through the building like fire on dry paper. Mrs. Peterson made sure everyone knew about the two from the 7th floor. Curious glances, whispers in the elevators, deliberate distance. Mark felt the weight of judgment. Relatives called concerned. Martha sent a message. I always knew. I just wanted you to be happy. But Peter didn't call. Clement also faced his demons. His ex-wife threatened to make visits with the kids difficult. I don't want them influenced by your lifestyle. One night, sitting on Clement's balcony, sharing a bottle of wine, frustration exploded. Sometimes I wonder if it's worth it, Clement vented. Losing my kids over this. Mark felt his heart tighten. Are you having regrets? About us? Never. Clement held his hand. But it hurts. It hurts more than I imagined. We can go slower. Be discreet. No. Clement was firm. I spent half my life being discreet. I'm not going back into that closet, even if it hurts to stay out. Mark admired that courage. He himself still struggled with his own. I'm afraid of losing my son permanently. You won't lose him. Peter just needs time. Clement kissed his forehead. And if he chooses to lose you, the loss is his. That night, they made love with different intensity, not of unbridled passion, but of the need for comfort, proof that this was worth every sacrifice. In the morning, Mark found a message from Peter. Dad, I need time, but I love you. Always. It wasn't acceptance, but it was a beginning. In the elevator, they ran into Mrs. Peterson. She looked at them with obvious disapproval. Clement, without letting go of Mark's hand, smiled politely. Good morning, Mrs. Peterson. She huffed and got off at the next floor. Mark squeezed Clement's hand, a smile spreading across his lips. I think we just officially scandalized the building. Screw them. Clement kissed him right there, in the elevator. I've hidden too much in my life. 6 months later, apartment 7C was being emptied. Mark had decided to move permanently to 7D. Why keep 2 apartments when they practically lived together? Peter showed up to help with the boxes. The relationship was still delicate, but it was rebuilding itself. Slow but genuine. Clement seems to make you happy, Peter said, carrying books. He does. Very much. Mark didn't hide his smile. I'm still getting used to it. But I want you to be happy, Dad. Really. It was enough. Mark hugged his son, tears streaming. Thank you. Clement prepared a dinner to celebrate. They invited new friends, a couple they met at a gay bar, neighbors from the 3rd floor, who proved surprisingly supportive. Even Martha showed up with a bottle of wine. I always knew you had secrets, she told Mark, without bitterness. I'm glad you're finally living without them. On the balcony, after everyone left, Mark and Clement watched the illuminated city. Was it worth it? Clement asked. Mark thought about everything. His son distant but returning, the judgments they still faced, the losses along the way. But he also thought about mornings waking up next to someone who truly loved him, shared laughter, the freedom of being who he always was. Every second, he replied, kissing him softly. I spent 52 years living a comfortable lie. I'd rather live the rest of my life in an uncomfortable but real truth. Uncomfortable. Clement feigned offense. I'm insulted. Mark laughed. That free laugh he'd only recently discovered. You know what I mean. I do, and I agree. Clement pulled him closer, to the best second act of our lives, to new beginnings. They toasted with cheap wine and expensive kisses. Across the street, lights turned on and off, other lives, other secrets, other stories. But there, on the balcony of apartment 7D, two mature men had finally found the courage to live their truths. And they discovered that it's never too late for love. Never too late to be who you've always been. Never too late to start over. The end. It's never too late to start over. It's never too late to be who you've always been. If this story touched your heart, leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more moving stories.